as we begin this new year, as we start a new series of messages, there are times that when I study Scripture that I like to go in and find characters in the Bible that we don't know a whole lot about, that we don't really hear about. Now, there are names in the Bible that we're very familiar with. There's Peter, James, John, there's David, Solomon, Ruth, Naomi, the Apostle Paul. We know of Mary and Martha, and there's marquee characters in the Bible that we talk about all the time, that we think on and we study. It's easy for us to go to the New Testament and go to the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we can study about Christ, and we can learn about all 12 disciples. I remember as just a very, very small boy in second grade Sunday school. That's where I learned the names of all 12 disciples. Simon, Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, Thomas, Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon, Judas, Bartholomew. I probably learned more in second grade Sunday school than I did at Baptist Seminary. I learned a lot of the Bible in second grade Sunday school. But we have characters that we know of, and then there are people in the Bible that we don't know so much about. And this morning, and for the next few weeks here in January, I want to bring a series of messages that's simply entitled, Who Are You? And this morning from 2 Kings chapter 5, we're going to look at a man by the name of Naaman. 2 Kings chapter 5, beginning in verse 1 is where we find ourselves this morning as we look at this lesser known character, Naaman. And we learn from his life that there are situations and times in our lives when we're wanting God to act on our part, to do something in our lives. We're going to Him and we're saying, God, I have this need. I have this situation, and it would be great if you would just take care of it right now. But we do that. So before we're too hard on Naaman and pick on him too much after we read his story, you and I are the same way. There are many times we go to God and we say, God, I've got this situation, we've got this problem, we're struggling in this area, I'm struggling physically in my health, and it would be great if you would just fix it right now. That would just be great. Take care of it immediately. We don't have that opportunity. A recent study shows us the reason why we don't always have patience and persistence in this area. A recent study shows that 3 times more people go through a restaurant's drive-thru than actually go into the restaurant. 3 times more people. So for every one person that goes in to place their order and sit down and order their food, 3 people go through the drive-thru. I went through one of the drive-thrus not too terribly long ago. I travel a lot for my Monday through Friday job, and sometimes the only option that I have is to go through a drive-thru. I went through one of the drive-thrus and I looked up, and there was this digital timer, and it was running. And so I asked the very unfriendly kid that was in the drive-thru window, who obviously loved his job, I said, "What is that for?" And he said, "That's how much time it takes to get you out of here." And that's what he said. He said, "They tell us that we're supposed to get you out of here in 2 minutes." So we watch this clock. And so from the time you pull up to make your payment, get your food, you're supposed to be out of here in 2 minutes. We are a culture of getting out of there in 2 minutes. We want things much faster. The same study indicates that the microwave oven is used 10 times more than the conventional stove or oven. 10 times more. What did you ever do before the microwave? I'm old enough to remember when we got our first microwave. And that thing was enormous. It was just this big, enormous thing. But how amazing it was that you could get popcorn in 3 minutes. How amazing it was that you could warm up whatever it was you're warming up in 30 seconds, 60 seconds. That was an amazing day when we got the microwave. But for every one person that wants to cook something on the stove top, put it in the oven, 10 of us use the microwave. So we're not patient, persistent people. We're just not. Some of us are better at it than others. Some of us have a higher degree of patience. But this morning I want us to look at this man, Naaman. A man that we hear about in 2 Kings, and a name that doesn't come up again after we read about him in 2 Kings chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. Now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but a leper. And the Syrians had gone out on raids and had brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel. She waited on Naaman's wife. Then she said to her mistress, "If only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, for he would heal him of his leprosy." And Naaman went in and told his master, saying, "Thus and thus said the girl who is from the land of Israel." Then the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. Then he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, "Now be advised when this letter comes to you, that I have sent Naaman my servant to you, that you may heal him of his leprosy." And it happened when the king of Israel read the letter, that he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God, to kill and make alive, that this man sends a man to me to heal him of his leprosy? Therefore please consider and see how he seeks a quarrel with me." So it was when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Please let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel." Then Naaman went with his horses and chariot, and he stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became furious, and went away and said, "Indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me, and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand over the place, and heal the leprosy. And for the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel, could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. And his servants came near and spoke to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. And he returned to the man of God, he and all his aides, and came and stood before him. And he said, "Indeed, now I know that there is a God, that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Now therefore, please take a gift from your servant." Naaman was a distinguished general, and he had often led the Syrians to victory, but he was stricken with the condition of leprosy, and we know this condition. We read about it throughout the Bible. There were a few instances where Christ in the Gospels encountered people with leprosy. This would be a skin affliction that would start very mildly and very inconsequentially, but then it would increase to the point to where the person would just literally lose parts of their flesh and lose fingers and toes. And I don't wish to be graphic, but I want you to understand the nature of his affliction. For as great as he was and as respected as he was in the great military conquest that he had hanging over him basically a death sentence, because there was no cure for this at this time. People would also have a social stigma about someone who had leprosy. Many times they were made to reside in their own commune or their own community. They were not allowed to go to the temple or synagogue to worship. They were not allowed to come into town and do commerce or make purchases in the city, because people believed that this condition was contagious, although it was mildly contagious, and you would have to have direct contact with someone with leprosy to really be in danger. But this morning, Naaman reaches a point where he decides that he would like for this to go away. He hears this from this servant girl who is taken in one of the military conquests. And she's heard of the prophet Elisha, which is another name that we know well. And she's heard that Elisha is doing miraculous things in the name of God, and that he's doing some healings. And so she tells Naaman's wife, if Naaman would just go to the prophet, he could be healed. Naaman misunderstands what she is saying and thinks that he's supposed to go to the king of Israel. So a letter is sent to him, and the king of Israel thinks that something is up and that it is it's an attempt to start a quarrel or a battle with this king. And we find out in just a moment what Naaman finally does. But quickly this morning, I want us to consider a few things about this story that helps us understand and will help you and me both understand that there are going to be these moments and times where even though we go to God and we say, God, I want you to fix what's going on and I need it fixed right now. It would be great to just have this taken care of right now. And sometimes we get that. Sometimes God comes and He comes immediately and takes care of what we're asking Him to do. That can and it does happen. But there are also times where God says, okay, I hear you. The answer, the resolution is out there, but you're going to have to wait just a minute. And we're going to find out that Naaman definitely had this situation. First, let's consider Naaman's condition in verse 1. Now, Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but a leper. So for as great as he was in his military conquest, he's living with this condition which would ultimately be a terminal condition for him. He would die from this condition if something didn't happen. While many of us are not faced with devastating circumstances like this, there are many times where we're faced with things and situations, obstacles, moments of pain and loss and suffering. These things come into our lives, and our natural reaction oftentimes is to go to God and say, I want this gone. I want it removed. Take it away, and it would be really great if you could just do it right now and just take it from me. But there's many times where it's the experience that God is wanting us to have. It is these moments where we have to wait on Him, where we have to be patient, where we have to just clothe this matter in prayer and trust Him and sit and wait on Him to deliver us. It's the experience that He wants us to have. According to a traditional Hebrew story, Abraham was sitting outside his tent one evening when he saw an old weary man, weary from age and journey, coming toward him. Abraham rushed out and greeted him, and then invited him into his tent. There he washed the old man's feet and gave him food and drink. The old man immediately began eating without saying any prayer or blessing. So Abraham asked him, don't you worship God? The old traveler replied, I worship fire only and reverence no other God. When he heard this, Abraham became incensed, grabbed the old man by the shoulders, and threw him out into the tent into the cold night air. When the old man departed, God called on his friend Abraham and asked him where the stranger was. Abraham replied, I forced him out because he does not worship you. God answered, I have suffered him these 80 years, although he dishonors me. Could you not endure him for one night? There's times where we have these situations, these things come into our lives. And we go to God and we want those things removed. It was just easy for Abraham to pick that guy up and remove him. And we sometimes have that same attitude. We just want the thing removed. Get it out of here. And God reminds us that there are situations where we have to endure and tolerate what is happening. So we see Naaman's condition. Secondly, let's consider Naaman's solution. In verses 2 through 5 that we read, this servant girl of Naaman's wife comes to her and says, I've heard of this prophet Elisha, and he does miracles of healing. He does great works of healing, and if my master, meaning Naaman, if he would go to Elisha, he would be saved and he would be delivered. This young girl illustrates sometimes the mysterious way that God works in our lives. Someone comes into our lives and tells us something that we may not have realized and encourages us to go in the direction of seeking God in this situation. So Naaman hears of this and decides that this is a good idea. So in verse 4, Naaman went in and told his master, saying that this girl, I love this, it says, thus and thus said the girl. So basically Naaman's saying she said this, and she said this, and she said this, and who knows, she may have been a talker. It may have taken her 30 minutes to tell the story. We don't know. But he's just saying, she said this and this, and she's from the land of Israel. And then the king of Syria at that time said, well, go. You can go. I'll send you a letter telling the king of Israel why you've come. So he departs with 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. 10 changes of clothing. Naaman packs like someone I know very, very well. 10 changes of clothing. But Naaman goes, and he gets to the king of Israel. And the king of Israel reads this letter and says, who do you think I am? I'm not God. I can't heal you of your leprosy. You're talking to the wrong person. So the solution to go to the prophet and find his way, we see in our third point as we consider Naaman's obstruction. Then he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, now be advised when this letter comes to you, that I have sent Naaman my servant to you, that you may heal him of his leprosy. And in verse 7, and it happened when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, am I God to kill and make alive, that this man sends a man to me to heal him of his leprosy? Therefore, please consider and see how he seeks a quarrel with me. The king automatically thinks that this man has been sent to cause him trouble. So he has no idea what to do. We see the instruction, and next we consider Naaman's instruction. In verse 8, so it was, when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he said to the king, saying, why have you torn your clothes? Please let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Elisha says to the king of Israel, send him to me. He was supposed to come to me in the first place. Send him to me, and he'll see that there is a prophet of God. Then Naaman went with his horses and chariot, and he stood at the door of Elisha's house. In verse 10, Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean. There's Naaman's instruction. Go to the Jordan River and bathe yourself, which just is another word, literally means go in and go completely under the water. 7 times. Now, to know the Jordan River is to know that it's not necessarily a beautiful, clean body of water. It's not looked at all that way. And in verse 11, we see Naaman's reaction to these instructions. But Naaman became furious and went away and said, indeed, I said to myself. Now don't miss this, because this is where Naaman and myself and Naaman and yourself, this is where we have a lot in common. Indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over me and heal the leprosy. Naaman wanted it done quick. He said, surely this prophet's going to come out and just wave his hand and say a quick prayer to God, and I am going to be healed. Naaman did not like the instruction that he got, where he had to go, what he had to do when he got there. And you and I don't like that either, when we want the answer now, yet God tells us the answer is out there for you, but here's what you've got to do to get it. We don't often like that. So we see Naaman becomes furious over his instruction. Next we consider Naaman's suggestion. This is one of those moments where someone comes to us and gives us good counsel. In verse 13, and his servants came near to him and spoke to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? Which means if the prophet would have told you to go out and to do something that was significant, you would have done it. We know who you are. You would have believed him. You would have done what he said. How much more then when he says, wash and be clean? So the servants are saying, why don't you do what God is telling you, what this prophet of God is telling you to do? Why don't you just do it? And there are people in our lives, and you may be married to one of them, that comes to you and says, listen, I understand what you're doing. You don't understand what you're doing. Why don't you just do what God is telling you to do? That surrender, that giving in. It doesn't always come easy to us. We don't always understand. We don't always want to do it. Naaman, he gets going about all these other rivers. Like, why can't I go bathe here? It's such a nicer river. Why can't I go bathe here? It's a cleaner river. What they don't understand is that God was giving Naaman, and God gives us many times specific instructions. You need to do this exactly this way, and by faith, if you will do this, then I will bring you this deliverance that you want. It's not coming immediately, but it is coming if you'll do what I tell you to do the way I tell you to do it. I found this quote this week: the trouble with good advice is that it usually interferes with our plans. And you know that's true. Sometimes that good advice that somebody gives you is contrary to the decisions you've already made. And that's the advice that you don't want to hear. When someone's got good advice, they're right, you know they're right, but you don't want to bring yourself to have to admit that you were wrong with your plans. So the benefits, what are some benefits of good advice? I found these this week. Never have more children than you have car windows. Never have more children than you have car windows. Never loan your car to someone to whom you have given birth. Pick your friends carefully. A friend never goes on a diet when you are heavy, or tells you how lucky you are to have a husband who remembers Mother's Day when his gift is a smoke alarm. Number 4, seize the moment. Remember all those women on the Titanic who waved off the dessert carts. And lastly, know the difference between success and fame. Success is Mother Teresa. Fame is Madonna. You know, good advice. When we get good advice, there are times when we don't want to hear it. We don't want to have to admit that the decision we made was not right. And that the word that someone is giving us is actually what we're supposed to be doing, because God has spoken to them and they in turn come to us and speak to us. Lastly, let's consider Naaman's decision. In verse 14, so he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. According to the saying of the man of God, Naaman did exactly what Elisha told him to do. Therefore, we can say that each time that he dipped himself into the Jordan, that first time he came up, what happened? Was there any change? No, it didn't happen then. The second time, down and back up, no change. The third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, in the water, coming up, no change. Frustration had to be seeping into Naaman's thought in his mind, where he's saying, this man who claims to be the voice of God told me to do this, and I've done it now 6 times and nothing's changed. And you and I feel the same way. We're following what we believe to be the instruction of God, what God's telling us to do. And nothing's changing. It's not changing fast enough. It's not happening fast enough. But it was not going to happen to him 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It was the 7th time that he went down and came back up. That's when he got the answer that he wanted and that he was looking for. But he had to go all the way to the very end. Charles Spurgeon, one of my favorite preachers of all time, states that Naaman was attacked by 2 things. The first was proud self. He internally demanded that Elisha come out and see him. He was proud. So he said, I've brought myself to you. You come to me. I'm the one. I'm the military leader. I'm the general. I'm the war hero. You come to me. And secondly, he had prideful questioning. He questioned why he should wash into Jordan when there were better rivers in his homeland. I can go back to Syria and find way better rivers to be in. Why do I have to be in this dirty Jordan here in Israel? Naaman overcame these two enemies and did what God told him to do. His flesh was restored to that of a child. He was clean. Naaman's response of faith was generously rewarded. His willingness to do what the prophet said was generously rewarded, and God makes the same promise to us when He gives us the answers that we're looking for. In many cases, that answer is more than we even asked for to begin with. Generously rewarded. The simple method of this miracle, performed without the prophet there. Elisha didn't have to come and watch him say anything, do anything. The instructions were Naaman's, and he followed them through. Did give God the credit for what happened? As Naaman said, obviously now, from what I've experienced, there's only one God, and that's the God of Israel. It was obvious that the healing came from God rather than the sort of magical incantation that Naaman had anticipated. Because you remember, Naaman just said the prophet's going to come out, he's going to say a few words, he's going to wave his hand. But what he didn't realize was that he was going to have to do the heavy lifting to get what he wanted. And you and I sometimes have to do the heavy lifting. We have to follow the letter of the instructions that we are given. And it's frustrating because that first time, and that second time, and that third time, we don't see anything happening. Nothing's changing. Nothing's happening. But when we finally go in and come back up that seventh time, we find out that God had the whole thing figured out. He just wanted to see how badly we want it. This kind of comes as we prepare for our time of commitment. Let's pray together. Father, as we prepare for this time of decision this morning, I pray, Father, that we would think on this simple story and realize that when we're needing you, when we're calling on you, the answers aren't always immediate. There are times where the answer comes much later, and there's a part we have to play, and there's things we have to do, and faith that we have to demonstrate. And when we do, you will generously reward our faith, and you'll generously provide the resolution that we seek. Father, have your will and your way in this time of decision. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.